What happens when a tough-talking MMA trainer tries to humiliate the janitor in front of a packed gym, only to end up flat on the floor himself? You ever witness a moment so unexpected, so raw, that it flips the room upside down in an instant? I'm talking about the kind of moment where everyone goes from laughing and joking to dead silent, holding their breath, not quite believing what just happened. That's exactly what went down one late afternoon inside Iron Forge Gym, a place where sweat clings to the walls and every punch echoes like thunder. Picture it. The gym's in Phoenix, Arizona. The desert heat outside is brutal, but inside the air feels just as heavy. Weights clanging, people grunting through sets, the faint squeak of sneakers sliding across mats. This isn't one of those polished, fancy health clubs. Iron Forge is rough around the edges. The kind of place where people come to work hard, bleed a little, and leave stronger. Its walls are painted with faded murals of fighters in mid-kick, gloves hanging on hooks like trophies from forgotten wars. In the middle of it all stands Victor Mallory. If you're from around here, you've probably heard his name. Victor's the kind of trainer who barks orders like a drill sergeant. He's built thick, square shoulders, a shaved head that gleams under the fluorescent lights, and a voice that cuts through the noise of the gym like a whistle. People respect his skills, sure, but fear? That's what really keeps them in line. He has this way of making even the most confident fighters feel small. And then there's Darnell Hughes. You wouldn't notice him right away. He's the one pushing a mop across the floor after the late-night sparring sessions, or wiping sweat off the mirrors before the morning classes begin. Darnell's tall but lean, quiet to the point that most people hardly know his voice. To them, he's just the janitor, a shadow in the background. But here's where the story takes a sharp turn. On this particular day, Victor was in rare form. He'd just finished drilling a group of young fighters, barking at them to push harder, faster, louder. His temper was already short. He didn't like mistakes, and when he saw one, he made sure the whole gym knew it. People laughed along nervously, because what else could they do? That's when Victor spotted Darnell. The janitor was off to the side, emptying a trash can near the ring, minding his business like always. But Victor's eyes locked on him like a predator spotting prey, and in that split second, you could almost feel the shift in the room. "Hey, Hughes!" Victor's voice boomed. Heads turned, conversations stopped, and suddenly all eyes were on the man with the mop. Darnell froze, hands still gripping the trash bag. He wasn't used to being called out, especially not in front of a crowd. Victor smirked, his arms crossed. "Tell me something, man. You ever even try a push-up? Or are you just here to clean up after real athletes?" A few of the younger fighters chuckled, not out of cruelty, but out of that nervous energy you get when the boss cracks a joke. But Darnell didn't laugh. His face stayed calm, maybe a little tired, like he'd heard versions of this before. "I'm just here to work, Mr. Mallory," he said quietly. His voice was steady, almost too steady for the situation. Victor grinned wider, sensing an opportunity. "Work? Come on, man, you're in a gym. You got a ring right there. Let's see what you got. Bet you wouldn't last 30 seconds in there with me." The gym erupted in laughter this time. Some folks looked uncomfortable, but the noise rolled anyway. And Darnell, standing there with the trash bag in his hand, had a choice to make. Stay silent, like always, or finally step into the spotlight he never asked for. But here's the thing. Sometimes, life doesn't give you much of a choice. And as the tension grew, it was clear this wasn't just about a joke anymore. It was about respect. Victor Mallory didn't just run Iron Forge Gym. In his mind, he was Iron Forge. Ask anyone who'd trained there for more than a week, and they'd tell you the same thing. The place carried his fingerprints. From the way sparring rounds were timed to the posters on the walls, everything bent to his style. He liked things loud, intense, and a little intimidating. Victor wasn't always a trainer. Years back, he was a fighter himself. Not the greatest, not the worst. Just one of those names that bounced around regional MMA circuits in Nevada and Arizona. He had a chin that could take punishment and fists that loved dishing it back. But as the years piled on, the wind slowed and the body didn't bounce back as fast. That's when he traded fighting gloves for a whistle and clipboard. Now, as a trainer, he built his reputation on toughness. To him, toughness didn't mean just surviving a fight. It meant eating insults, swallowing pride, and learning to fight angry. That was his recipe. Some hated it, but others swore it hardened them into competitors. On that day, he strutted around the gym with the kind of energy that dared people to look away. Sweat soaked his t-shirt, his heavy arms swung with each step, and when he stopped near the ring, his presence alone pulled a circle of fighters and bystanders closer. They wanted to be near the action, whether it was training or, in this case, whatever Victor was about to stir up. "Y'all saw that drill today?" Victor shouted at no one in particular. "Half of you couldn't throw a straight jab if your life depended on it." Some of the younger fighters laughed awkwardly, hoping to stay on his good side. Others kept their eyes down, pretending to tape their wrists or adjust their gloves. Victor thrived on this. He liked the fear, the awkward silence, the way people bent themselves around his moods. It reminded him that even if his fighting days were gone, his control wasn't. That's why Darnell Hughes had become such an easy target. The man never argued, never cracked a joke back, never played along. To Victor, that silence was weakness. He thought he could chip away at Darnell like he did with fighters. Except Darnell wasn't there for Victor. He was there for a paycheck, nothing more. But Victor couldn't see that. All he saw was someone in his gym who didn't bend, who didn't bow, who didn't acknowledge his power. And to a man like Victor, that was almost a personal insult. So when he spotted Darnell by the trash can, it felt like the perfect setup. A crowd was watching, and Victor loved a crowd. He fed on it. "You think sweeping floors makes you strong, Hughes?" Victor barked, circling closer. "You think just showing up in this place makes you part of it?" "No, man, you gotta earn it." Darnell didn't flinch. He tied the trash bag slowly, deliberately, like Victor's words were just background noise. That calmness only stoked the fire. Victor grinned, a little cruel this time. "Tell you what, why don't you step in the cage? Just for fun, 1 round. Show everybody here you're not just hiding behind that mop." The gym grew louder with chatter. Some faces lit up with excitement, others with unease. Everyone sensed something was about to happen, but no one wanted to be the one to stop it. Victor loved this moment, the build-up, the spotlight. In his mind, he was about to give his fighters a live demonstration. How confidence could crush hesitation, how a trained man could dismantle a nobody. He cracked his knuckles, smirking as he leaned on the ropes of the cage. "What do you say, Hughes? You and me, 30 seconds. I'll even go easy on you." For a heartbeat, the gym waited. Darnell set down the trash bag, straightened his back, and finally lifted his eyes to meet Victor's, and something in that stare, quiet, steady, unshaken, didn't match the story Victor was trying to tell. But Victor didn't notice, and that blindness was about to cost him more than he could imagine. Darnell Hughes wasn't a name anybody at Iron Forge Gym knew well. To them, he was just the janitor, the man with the mop and bucket, the guy who showed up when everyone else was too tired to clean their own mess. But behind that quiet routine was a story nobody there had ever bothered to ask about. Darnell grew up in Oakland, California, back in the late 80s and 90s, a time when the city was rougher, sharper around the edges. His mom raised him and his younger brother mostly on her own. Money was always tight, and the streets had a way of testing you whether you asked for it or not. Boxing wasn't a hobby for him. It was survival. There was a little community gym not far from his apartment, run by an old trainer who charged kids a few bucks just to keep them off the corners. That's where Darnell learned to move, to guard, to hit back when someone came at him. The ring became his classroom, and gloves became his textbooks. He wasn't chasing trophies or belts. He just wanted to walk home without looking over his shoulder. By his late teens, Darnell had quick hands and sharper instincts. He fought in a few amateur matches, nothing big, just local events where the prize money barely covered groceries. But life pulled him in other directions. His mom got sick, and bills stacked higher than his dreams. So instead of chasing fights, Darnell picked up jobs, construction, warehouse shifts, janitorial work, anything steady. Now, at 37, he found himself in Phoenix, pushing a mop inside Iron Forge Gym. He didn't mind the work. It was steady, and steady was something he'd learned to value. He kept to himself, nodded politely, and stayed invisible. That invisibility had become a kind of shield. But invisibility comes at a cost. People like Victor Mallory saw it as weakness. They mistook his silence for submission. They saw a man cleaning floors and assumed he had no fight left in him. Darnell knew better. He still carried the rhythm of those boxing days inside him. Every mop stroke mirrored the jabs he used to throw. Every bucket he hauled reminded him of the weights he used to lift. His body hadn't forgotten. It was just waiting. So when Victor called him out in front of the whole gym, Darnell wasn't shocked. This wasn't the first time someone had tried to test him, to make him small. But what Victor didn't understand was that Darnell had already faced harder men in darker alleys with a lot more on the line than pride. He didn't answer right away. That was his way, measured, calm, never giving the other person what they expected. The gym thought he'd back down like always. Some of the younger fighters even smirked, thinking this would be easy entertainment. Finally, Darnell set down the trash bag, wiped his hands on his work pants, and spoke. "Mr. Mallory," he said evenly, "you don't want that." The room hushed. The way he said it, steady, not scared, not angry, made a few heads tilt. Victor laughed, loud and mocking. "Don't want that? Man, you can't even take out the trash without breaking a sweat. You serious right now?" Darnell didn't move, didn't blink. He just repeated himself, a little firmer. "You don't want that." That was the thing about him. He wasn't trying to act tough. He was just telling the truth, and sometimes the truth carries more weight than a shout ever could. The gym didn't know what to make of it, but one thing was clear. The quiet janitor wasn't going to stay invisible much longer, and the more Darnell stood his ground, the more Victor's pride twisted into something reckless. The tension inside Iron Forge that afternoon was like a rope pulled too tight, waiting to snap. Everyone had gone quiet after Darnell's calm reply, but Victor wasn't about to let silence win. His ego was too big, his pride too loud. He leaned against the ropes of the cage, smirking, trying to turn the crowd back in his favor. "Hear that, folks? Hughes thinks I don't want it. That's cute. Man's been scrubbing toilets so long he thinks he's a fighter." The crowd laughed, but this time it was thinner, weaker. People were starting to notice Darnell wasn't folding. They shifted uncomfortably, caught between loyalty to their trainer and curiosity about the man who'd just drawn a line in the sand. Darnell didn't rise to it. He didn't shout, didn't cuss, didn't let his body twitch with anger. He just stood tall, his mop leaning against the wall like a weapon left untouched. That stillness unsettled some of the fighters more than Victor's shouting ever could. Victor couldn't stand it. He needed control, needed to make this janitor bend in front of everyone. He motioned toward the cage. "Come on, Hughes. 1 round. I'll give you a head guard, gloves, whatever you want. Just 30 seconds. Show us all that mop hand strength." Nobody missed the way Victor said, "mop hand." It wasn't just a jab. It was a way of saying, "You don't belong here." A few of the fighters exchanged glances. Some grinned, eager for a show, but others frowned. One of the newer kids, barely 18, whispered to his buddy, "Man, this doesn't feel right." His friend shrugged, but kept watching. Nobody dared step in. Darnell finally spoke again. "You really want this?" His tone was level, no theatrics, just a man asking a question. Victor laughed, loud and harsh. "Oh, I want this. Everybody here wants this, don't we?" He raised his arms, and a wave of cheers filled the gym, though not everyone joined. Some clapped slowly, hesitant, sensing the line being crossed. Still, peer pressure is a powerful thing. The group energy pushed the moment forward like a current, and no one dared swim against it. Darnell sighed quietly, like a man realizing there was no way out but through. He untied the knot in his apron and set it on the bench. He wasn't smiling, wasn't puffing up his chest, just preparing. A hush fell. The janitor had agreed. Victor's grin widened. To him, this was a victory already. He imagined the scene. One clean takedown, maybe a flashy submission, and the janitor would be humbled forever. He'd turned the gym's respect into something unshakable. One of the assistant coaches, a wiry guy named Travis, stepped forward nervously. "Vic, maybe this ain't a good idea, man." "Liability, you know?" Victor shot him a glare. "Relax. It's just a little fun." 30 seconds, Travis backed off. He knew better than to push. Meanwhile, Darnell slipped off his work gloves, the cheap rubber kind used for scrubbing. His hands were scarred, knuckles rough from years of hard jobs. To anyone who looked closely, they weren't the hands of a stranger to fights, but most didn't look closely. They were too busy whispering and waiting. Victor motioned toward the locker area. "Get this man some gloves and headgear. Let's make it official." A pair of fighters scrambled to grab the gear. They handed it to Darnell, who put it on quietly, like he'd done it before. His movements were smooth, practiced, no fumbling or hesitation. That caught the eye of a few in the crowd, but nobody said it out loud. Victor bounced on his toes, rolling his shoulders, putting on a show for his audience. Don't blink, folks. This'll be over before it starts. But the ones paying closer attention, the ones watching Darnell's calm, deliberate preparation, weren't so sure anymore. And in that stillness, in that quiet before the storm, the real fight was already beginning. By the time both men stood near the cage, the gym had transformed. What started as a normal training afternoon now felt like a stage. People had circled around, some perched on benches, others leaning against heavy bags. Phones were out, a few already recording, eager to capture whatever was about to happen. Victor thrived on that energy. He lived for it. He rolled his shoulders, shadowboxed a few punches, loud exhales cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. He wanted everyone to see his power before he even touched Darnell. "Let's go, Hughes," Victor barked, his grin wide, his voice sharp. "Don't make me beg." Darnell stepped into the cage slowly, deliberately. He wasn't smiling, wasn't shaking, just calm. He tightened the Velcro on his gloves, bent his knees slightly, and gave the smallest nod as if to say, "I'm ready when you are." The assistant coach, Travis, looked like he wanted to crawl out of his own skin. He paced near the ropes, muttering, "Man, this is a bad idea. Real bad idea." But nobody listened. The crowd's energy drowned him out. Victor raised his arms to hype them up even more. "Y'all about to see why I'm the man around here. Don't blink." The room roared with a mix of cheers and nervous laughter. Inside the cage, though, the mood was different. Darnell's eyes stayed locked on Victor, steady and unbroken. He shifted lightly on his feet, left foot forward, weight balanced just right. A few older fighters in the back noticed. They exchanged looks, one whispering, "He's been in a ring before." The other just nodded slowly. Victor didn't notice. He was too busy playing to the audience. Finally, Travis stepped in reluctantly to act as a referee. "All right, just 30 seconds. Keep it clean. Don't go crazy." Victor chuckled. "Don't worry. He won't last that long." The fighters touched gloves, Victor slapping hard, Darnell just a light tap. That contrast said everything. The cage door clanged shut. The sound echoed through the gym, silencing the last bits of chatter. Suddenly, all you could hear was the faint hum of the AC and Victor's heavy breathing as he bounced in place. Travis raised his hand, dropped it. "Go!" Victor charged forward, fast and aggressive, throwing a looping right meant to scare more than to land. The crowd shouted, some standing on tiptoe to see better. Darnell didn't move much, just a small pivot, letting Victor's fist cut through air. His eyes stayed calm, tracking every muscle twitch, every opening. He wasn't rushing. He was waiting. Victor reset quickly, throwing a jab this time, then another, trying to test the distance. The blows came hard, but Darnell's guard rose smooth, deflecting with the kind of ease that comes from repetition, not luck. The crowd noticed. A ripple of surprise moved through them. This wasn't the helpless janitor they expected. Victor, frustrated, growled, "Come on! Hit me!" He swung harder, his movements growing sloppy with each miss. Darnell didn't answer. His silence was louder than any taunt. He simply let Victor burn energy, let him overcommit. The way he shifted on his feet looked more like a boxer than a janitor, more like a man who'd done this dance before. Travis glanced at the clock. Only 10 seconds had passed. Victor snarled, "You're mine, Hughes." He lunged forward, fists flying wild. And that's when it happened. Darnell saw his moment. But before anyone could process what was about to happen, the fight was about to turn upside down. The cage rattled as Victor stormed forward, his body a blur of sweat and muscle. He swung wild, looking for that highlight reel moment he'd already promised to the crowd. Every punch echoed in the gym, sharp smacks of leather against air, but none of them connected the way he wanted. Darnell kept moving, small steps, precise. He didn't flinch, didn't panic. His shoulders rolled with each dodge, his gloves deflecting jabs like they were nothing. The crowd, once roaring, started murmuring. They saw it. The janitor wasn't overwhelmed, he was calculating. Victor threw a heavy hook, the kind of punch that could end a fight if it landed clean. But Darnell slipped inside it, close enough to feel the heat of Victor's body. For a split second, he could have countered right there. Instead, he stepped back, letting Victor stumble slightly from his own momentum. Gasps rippled through the gym. A few fighters exchanged glances. This wasn't luck. This was skill. Victor, red-faced now, snarled, "Stand still, Hughes." He He swung again, faster, harder, but the precision was gone. He was chasing, not fighting. Darnell's expression never changed. Calm eyes, tight guard, his breathing steady, measured. He looked like a man who'd done this 1,000 times, just in different rings, under different lights. Travis, acting as referee, could feel it. He shouted, "All right, keep it controlled." But his voice barely cut through the noise of the gym. People were on their feet now, some shouting for Victor, others beginning to cheer for the underdog they hadn't expected to root for. Victor jabbed again, but this time, Darnell caught the rhythm. He slipped to the side, saw the gap, and let his right hand load just enough. His knuckles tightened, his body coiled like a spring. One breath, one moment, one opening. Then it happened. Darnell unleashed a short, sharp right cross. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't loud, but it was perfect. His fist landed square on Victor's jaw with a crack that silenced the room. The trainer's head snapped back, his legs buckled, and before anyone could blink, Victor Mallory was on the mat, flat, eyes blinking in shock. The crowd erupted, but not with cheers right away. It was disbelief, an explosion of gasps, shouts, hands flying to mouths. Phones shook as people tried to capture what they'd just seen. Victor, the man who mocked, the man who ruled this gym, the man who thought he'd humiliate the janitor, wasn't moving. Darnell stepped back, lowering his gloves. He didn't strut, didn't raise his arms. He just waited, breathing steady, as if to say, "I told you, you didn't want this." Travis dropped to his knees, checking Victor. "Vic, you good? Talk to me." Victor groaned, rolling slightly, but the fight was over. It had ended in a single punch. The silence that followed was louder than any cheer could have been. The fighters standing around the cage looked at each other, eyes wide. Some mouthed, "No way." Others shook their heads, almost smiling, not out of mockery, but out of awe. One of the younger kids whispered, "He dropped him. One hit." Just one. And just like that, the power in the room shifted. Victor wasn't the untouchable king anymore, and Darnell, quiet, overlooked Darnell, was no longer invisible. But the knockout was only the beginning. What came after would change everything inside Iron Forge Gym. For a long stretched-out moment, nobody in Iron Forge Gym moved. The sound of Victor's body hitting the mat still seemed to hang in the air. All you could hear was the whir of the AC and Victor's heavy groan as he tried to sit up, wobbling like a man who'd just woken from a bad dream. Then the whispers started. "Yo, he's out. Man, Hughes just slept him. No way that just happened." The circle of fighters pressed in closer, some with their phones still filming, others lowering them in disbelief. A few of the kids who once laughed at Victor's jokes were wide-eyed now, staring at Darnell like they were seeing him for the first time. Victor shook his head, blinking hard, trying to clear the fog. He pushed himself up on shaky arms, his pride hurting far more than his jaw. The look on his face was one of pure disbelief. This wasn't the script he'd written in his head. He was supposed to dominate, humiliate, and walk away a hero. Instead, he was the one humiliated, flat on his back in front of everyone. Travis, still kneeling near him, said softly, "That's it, Vic. It's over." Victor snapped back, voice rough. "Shut up. I slipped. He got lucky." But nobody in that gym believed it. They'd all seen it. Darnell hadn't swung wildly. That punch was clean, sharp, intentional. Victor climbed unsteadily to his feet, wobbling as he glared at Darnell. His jaw clenched tight, his fists balled up like he wanted to go again. But the energy had shifted, and he could feel it. The room wasn't on his side anymore. The same fighters who once laughed at his insults were now looking at him with something closer to doubt. And worse, respect was flowing toward Darnell. The janitor stood quietly in the center of the cage, gloves still on, body still calm. He hadn't celebrated, hadn't gloated, hadn't even cracked a smile. That restraint said more than a victory dance ever could. He looked like a man who didn't need to prove anything, even though he just had. One of the younger fighters muttered to his buddy, "Dude's legit." "That was no lucky shot," another added. "He moves like a boxer." Bet he's done this before Victor heard some of it, and every word cut deeper. He wanted to shout, to reclaim control, but every time he opened his mouth, the memory of that punch hung in the air heavier than anything he could say. Finally, he spat out, "This don't mean nothing." "He ain't a fighter. He's just the janitor," Darnell finally spoke, voice steady but not angry. Doesn't matter what job I do. Respect is respect. That line hit the room harder than the punch had. A ripple went through the crowd, fighters nodding, trainers exchanging glances. It was the kind of truth that couldn't be argued with. Victor's face burned red. He stormed out of the cage, brushing past Travis, ignoring everyone calling his name. The slam of the locker room door echoed through the gym like thunder. All eyes turned back to Darnell. For the first time since he'd started working there, he wasn't invisible. People approached him hesitantly. One of the younger kids said, "Mr. Hughes, you ever, fight for real?" Another added, "You gotta teach me that punch." Darnell smiled faintly, tugging off his gloves. "I used to box a little. Long time ago, that understatement only deepened the awe." The rest of the day, whispers followed him. The story spread fast, faster than Victor could contain it. By the time evening classes started, everyone in Iron Forge gym knew. The janitor had put the trainer down in one hit. But outside those walls, the story wasn't finished yet. The real test was how Victor and everyone else would treat Darnell after the dust settled. Word spread through Phoenix quicker than Victor Mallory could control it. Iron Forge Gym had always been Victor's stage, but now the story wasn't about him. It was about the janitor who dropped him in one hit. Clips from cell phones started popping up online. Grainy footage showed Darnell's calm stance, Victor's wild swings, and then, bang, the punch that changed everything. For days after, the atmosphere in the gym felt different. People who once ignored Darnell nodded at him, offered him water, even struck up conversations. Some of the fighters asked him for tips. He never bragged, never replayed the knockout for attention. He just did his job like always, mop in hand, quiet, steady. Victor tried to act like nothing had changed, but it had. His commands didn't carry the same weight. Fighters didn't laugh as quickly at his jokes. Some even questioned his drills, and that stung worse than the punch. Pride is fragile, and Victor's had been shattered in front of the very people he wanted to impress. One evening, about a week later, Victor crossed paths with Darnell in the locker room. The silence was thick. Victor's jaw was still swollen, a faint bruise lingering like a reminder he couldn't wash off. He stared at Darnell for a long second before finally saying, voice low, "You got lucky." Darnell didn't bite. He just looked at him calmly and replied, "Luck doesn't put you on the floor. Respect keeps you off it." Then he walked out, leaving Victor alone with his reflection. And that's the thing. Sometimes the people we overlook are carrying the heaviest lessons. Victor thought strength was about noise, about dominance, about being the loudest in the room. But Darnell showed that true strength lives in patience, discipline, and quiet confidence. That day in the cage wasn't about boxing or MMA. It was about dignity. It was about a man refusing to be belittled, and in one perfectly timed punch, proving he was more than the job he worked. Life's like that, isn't it? You never know what battles people have already fought, what skills they carry, or what they've survived. The person you underestimate today might be the one who humbles you tomorrow. So here's the takeaway. Respect people. Doesn't matter if they're scrubbing floors, bagging groceries, or running a company. Every person's story is bigger than what you see. And if you're ever tempted to treat someone as less, remember Victor Mallory, because the floor you laugh at today might be the one you end up lying on tomorrow. If this story hit you, share it with someone who needs that reminder. And ask yourself, are you building people up or trying to tear them down? Because one way or another, it always comes back around.